Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Esau, Amalek. What do all those names have in common? What connection can we make from those biblical names to the world we live in today? Want to know the answer to that question? Watch this video, because the connection is powerful, and what you learn will undoubtedly change the way you look at life and the world around you. Let's jump into the ancient biblical world for just a few minutes and shed some light on things that nobody is talking about. Watch to the end, folks, because you'll walk away with a new perspective. I want to start our conversation with the understanding that there is a general premise in human history that we know. This is something that we've learned over the years. We've watched it in the Bible. And that is, history is very important to study. Because if we don't study history and we do not apply the lessons that history teaches us, then we are, in essence, bound to repeat those lessons.
I hear you.
And I will simply say that God, when he gave us his word and told us that certain things would happen, he made it very easy for us to understand and very easy for us to be able to relate to, because not only does he give us these prophecies concerning what's going to happen, he has effectively demonstrated and illustrated to us what actually happens when we see history not teaching us the lessons that need to be taught. And he also demonstrates to us patterns of behavior that we can always bank on. God doesn't stray away from the pattern of righteousness that he chooses to demonstrate to us, because he is God and he is perfect, right? And there's many other things that we see demonstrated to us on a regular basis that I think are critically important that we just lose sight of. We just forget. Like we just completely like we don't even think about it. And when we ignore those things, we take those things out of context. And I'll give you a great example of this, right? The Prime Minister of Israel recently referred to the Hamas as Amalekites. Now, the pagan secular world hears that phrase and all of a sudden believes that the Prime Minister of Israel is calling out for the destruction of a whole race of people, right? First of all, he's talking about a political organization. He's not talking about a group of people, number one. Number two, the destruction of a political organization is the objective of most people who have political opponents concerning their opponents that they continue to fight. But that's beside the point. I think that what we have to do is we have to explain to people the significance of Amalek, and we have to be able to get them to realize why it is what it is. Now, I want to just simply say this right off the bat, okay, before we get into the history and we talk about this, right? When we talk about who Amalek was as a person, we know that he was the grandson of Esau. But what I want to say with respect to Amalek, just off the bat, just create a summary of the matter here so that everybody understands, and then we'll go back and get into the history. We'll start identifying some patterns and we'll talk about it, right? God made it very clear to the people of Israel that if Amalek was not dealt with, then Amalek, in essence, would eventually destroy the lives of hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of Israelis, of Jews. There was a responsibility for them. God gave to their king, in essence. Saul is one example, but there were many that went before that, right? Yeah, like for example, we read about the time where Moses has his arms lifted up, right? That was a battle against Amalek. But let's just go back for 1 second and talk about this. The purpose for God saying that Amalek needed to be dealt with was because if Amalek was not dealt with, Amalek would have destroyed the lives of every single Jew. We know that. The Bible made that very clear. And by the way, in the Bible, we see patterns of what has happened when the Jews did not deal with the Amalekites. And when they did not deal with the Amalekites, they suffered immensely. They did. As a matter of fact, the very last descendant of an Amalekite, believe it or not, was believed to be King Herod. Some people actually believe that.
That's an interesting
connection. And there are some interesting connections to be said about that, especially understanding how many people died as a result of, how many Jews died as a result of what he did. Now, I will say this because I think this is kind of important as we go back. When Netanyahu says, and any Jew would understand this, Hamas is Amalek, what he is in essence saying as the leader of Israel is that we cannot have the same attitude that we had over the years in our early history concerning Amalek and spare their existence, because if we spare their existence, they will eventually come back and destroy us. He is not talking about a race of people. He is actually talking about the political organization, the group that is gathered with the sole purpose of the destruction of the nation of Israel. So what he is basically saying is he's saying we must destroy an organization that wants to destroy us, or history will repeat itself. And like the Amalekites did, we will suffer great persecution.
Okay, let's start off with the beginning. When people say Hamas, okay, when Netanyahu says, I think it was the Minister of Defense said that the Hamas are animals, Israel was blamed for saying all the Palestinians are animals.
Yeah, which is not true.
Which is not true. So here's what I want to stress, okay? And again, we're going back to the World War II correlation, and that's really important. There is a difference between Germany and Nazi, okay? Did America go to fight against the Germans in World War II? Did the Americans go to fight against the Nazis in World War II? And when you say that we should, we should fight against the enemy until the enemy are gone, who are the enemy? And anybody in the United States of America, anybody who landed on the beaches of Normandy would say, our fight is with the Nazis, not with the German people. Now, that doesn't mean that the Nazis were not Germans. That doesn't mean that all of the Germans that does not mean, though, that all of the Germans were Nazis. So when the United States of America says we should devastate, we should completely ruin the Nazi government, we should kill all the Nazis, that doesn't mean that somebody's saying kill all the Germans. And this is something that people need to understand. But our enemies tend to turn that into something else. Two, maybe we should go back to the story of Amalek and tie it together and see why Amalek has become Amalek has become a symbol or a term or an element that we use in our culture to identify something that needs to be taken care of, that wasn't taken care of, and caused a problem later on.
Yep.
And that is as much a symbol as anything else. Don't forget, we are the people of the Bible. Biblical stories are part of our heritage, our culture, our language, and they seep in even into our politics. So let's go back to the story of Amalek and connect it to what happened, and maybe that'll make it a little bit clearer, because there's a lot of connections, there's a lot of correlations between what happened back then. And I think we're going back to Exodus, and the children of Israel have come out from a terrible situation, slavery in Egypt. We've just now broken the bondage of slavery, and we're on our way to transfer from a nation of slaves and bond people to inheriting our own nation and becoming the nation that God wants us to be. And we are traveling in the wilderness. We're barely on the edge of survival. We're barely holding it together, and the different peoples in the area are standing in our way to achieving this promised land event. And one of those peoples were the Amalekites. And if you go back to Exodus 17, okay, there's the whole story of what and how. But before we go into the story of the Amalekites, I was just now reading it here a minute ago. And the first part of chapter 17 in Exodus is the story of Moses with the water in the wilderness, hitting the rock. So we are in the wilderness. We're trying to deal with what's going on. We're on our way to becoming a nation. We're on our way to fulfill God's promise for us in our promised land. And the Amalekites decide to get in the way. And I can't help but make that connection to what the Palestinians / the Hamas are doing actually standing between. And again, this is something that didn't start on the 7th of October. It started way before.
But I have to stop you, David, for just a second, because there's a language barrier that exists here that I want to make very clear. Okay. When we use a specific type of slang, a very lazy rift in English, right? We talk about getting something out of the way or getting somebody out of the way. It's oftentimes associated with mindless murder, right? That's what it's typically associated with.
Okay.
So when you say get them out of the way, I want to make it clear that what you're talking about is remove the danger that exists to you and your people. Getting them out of the way is not the issue in the sense that we just want to kill them indiscriminately. When we talk about getting them out of the way, we are talking about removing the danger, the immediate danger to your people. And the problem is as long as an organization like Hamas exists, your people are in danger.
So the chapter in Exodus starts off with, and Amalek came to fight against Israel.
That's right.
Which basically indicates they didn't have to.
Right, that's right.
They didn't have to. It wasn't something that they were. I mean, we didn't come to conquer them. We didn't come to kill them. They came to fight against Israel, meaning we're on our way to our promised land. We're on our way to doing what we need to do. We're on our way to fulfilling God's plan. And a people group called Amalek, a nation group, a people group, and again, you can go back to their, background, but basically they said, we are going to inhibit, to stand between, to make sure you do not fulfill your promise.
Okay, and David, let me add to this, because this is very important, and this is a biblical perspective issue that I think we have to talk about. And I'm just going to make myself very clear here. I have never heard anybody talk about this. I've studied the Bible for a long time. I've listened to lots of Bible teachers. I've never heard any Bible teacher talk about this. But I'm going to make a very bold assertion about something that I think is really important to make, right? Jacob and Esau had significant conflict with one another.
Yep.
Perhaps some of the most significant conflict centers around the fact, and this is all basic Bible knowledge, Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for some food. Okay? Jacob, through some manipulation and scheming with the help of his mother, who did not behave ethically or morally, right, fooled their father into giving him the birthright, even though he was the younger son, and we know very clearly did not want to give that birthright to Jacob. He was deceived into doing it, or tricked into doing it. He did it, and the conflict that existed between Esau and Jacob as a result of that was significant. Esau wanted to take Jacob's life, and this is, of course, why Jacob fled the area, and they had been divided for a long time. Matter of fact, Jacob had been gone for so long that he missed out on the death of his mother, was not able to be with her in the last years, which was a terribly tragic time. And in that time, I think it's safe to make this observation. I think it's safe to say that in that time, Esau's grandson was born. Esau's grandson was Amalek.
And he is the father of.
He is, in essence, the father of the Amalekites.
Okay.
Now, I want to point this out because this is really, 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 really important to point out. Okay? Esau eventually came to grips with the fact that he was not going to experience the blessing that his brother Jacob experienced, but found himself satisfied because, as he told his brother, God had still blessed him with all kinds of things. But there was a sense of entitlement that existed within Esau, especially in the initial phases, for everything that Jacob had. Make no mistake about it, there was an element of maturity that Esau was able to hold on to that kept him from murdering his brother and allowed him to make peace with his brother and move forward. But I can tell you, Esau's descendants did not feel that way. And as a matter of fact, when we start getting into the Idumeans and we get into that whole relationship and how that ties into Herod, like we just talked about, there's a lot there. But let me just simply say this. Amalek undoubtedly had in his heart a very deep understanding in his mind that he was entitled to something more significant than what he had through his grandfather. He believed, I can almost guarantee you, something was embedded into him from his grandfather that he believed he had the right to what Jacob had. By the way, This would not be the first time in their family history that this happened, okay? The first time in their family history that this happened was Ishmael.
There you go.
And if you remember, Ishmael
Ishmael is yelling out here and saying, "This is mine. This is mine. This is mine."
is entitled to it. He felt that way.
It comes to me, and God makes it very clear who it goes to and who it doesn't go to.
Absolutely. So the modern father of the Arabs would be, in essence, Ishmael. And when you take the Arabs, right, and you give them a clear understanding of what they feel entitled to, this is almost hereditary. This is almost passed down in their genes. From let me just say this: it's a family issue. They have years and years and years and years and years and years and years. They've been taught this is my right to this. This is my right to this. And eventually they forget about the story. All they know is about the division. So when Amalek came to do what he did, understand, Amalek had a conviction, guaranteed, that what he does not have was something that should have belonged to him. God knew that. God saw that. God warned his people about that, knowing full well that this was going to end up being a problem.
Okay.
So
I can't help making a Balagan connection here because
there's a huge Balagan connection.
Okay, because and like I say, you can go to the linebacker head camera. You can go to the cable camera that looks at the action from the top, and you can go to the Goodyear blimp and look at all of this going on. And let's put it this way. From the head camera, the Amalekites believed that they should have been blessed. They believed that promise should have gone to them. They believed that the Israelites had mistakenly or not rightfully taken something that should have been theirs. And as a result of that, they believed that they were justified in not allowing the Israelites to move across the desert on their way to their promise.
That's right.
They were justified in standing in the way and saying, "This is ours, not yours. We are not going to let you take it."
That's right.
I mean, doesn't it yell Arabs and Palestinians?
It is, but keep in mind that you say it yells Arab and Palestinians, but there is a genuine familial connection. The feelings that the Arabs have was passed down to them from generation to generation, starting as early as Ishmael. And in some sections, we know the Amalekites don't exist anymore, but the tradition was passed in that vein. Imagine this for a second. I would be shocked, and I think I can prove it biblically. I just have not finished all the groundwork for this. It's been one of those lifelong projects that I've just never really, I've been on it a little bit, and I just need to get my rear in gear and spend the 300, 400 hours I think I need to do this. But I guarantee you I can make a connection. I'm almost convinced I can make a connection between the Amalekites and the descendants of Ishmael. I bet you, not a physical connection, meaning a familial one, although there is a familial one, in that you're still talking about the descendant of an uncle, right? So that's not even an issue there. The issue is, I know that there had to have been a parallel of people group that existed in the time that the Amalekites existed, that both associated themselves with an understanding of entitlement, even though they did not carry They not only did not carry the promise, but they did not carry the same religious groups or people groups. By the way,
I'm going to make a big connection.
This is something.
Here. Get ready.
Yeah, and I want to say this. This is something that exists with the Arabs today. You have an Iranian who is a Shiite. You have the Hamas and most of the Arab world who are Sunnis, and although they come from different backgrounds, have different philosophies, different ideas, they're going to still come together for the common purpose of the elimination of the Jewish state because of the feeling of entitlement they have to this particular area.
So, as the Amalekites did, they're going to come out. They didn't just let this happen, okay? And again, the whole basis of the story of the Amalekites is they could have allowed the Jews, they could have allowed the Israelites to go on their way towards their destination, towards their destiny. They came out to fight. They came out to say, we're going to stand in the middle of this. And I'm going to go into the Goodyear blimp right now. And again, I'm the Jewish element in this conversation.
It's a very
let's see-
important. Yeah.
Let's see if I can connect this, because we're seeing that God has a plan. God decides who is in the zone of his plan. If you are this, I have decided this is my plan, this is my promise. If you are in, you're part of that. Okay? But if you're not in that, then you are upset that you are not blessed the way you will be blessed if you are in the plan. Okay? And you can decide, wait a minute, no, we are the receivers of the blessing. It's not what the Bible says. It's not what God says. We are the receivers of this blessing. And I don't know if you're following where I'm going with this, because, again, I'm the Jewish part of this, and I'm thinking about the early church.
Yeah, I know where you're going. I know totally where you're going.
I think about the early church, who God made a plan, God made a promise, okay? God said, this is the way, and the early church says, no. That they don't deserve that promise. They don't deserve that plan. We will supersede ourselves on that promise, and we will take credit and take all of the results of being in God's promise. And as a result of that, we will get the blessing that we don't really deserve. And what they didn't understand is what they did was hinder God's promise, hinder God's plan. And again, and again, we can take it even further than that, this is a lesson for us. You need to be in God's plan. Okay, but I want to go back to Amalek. And I want to go back to Bibi saying, Benjamin Netanyahu saying, this is an Amalek. This is our Amalek. We have to make sure that we deal with this in the appropriate manner. Now, again, I'm going back to, don't say Amalek. Don't say the Palestinians are Amalek, but I will say that the whole Arab world is standing between Israel and its promise. They have put themselves there. I think I read that 83% of the Arab world, not only the people in Gaza, 72% supported what Hamas did, according to polls. The people in Israel, Palestine, meaning the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, I think the percentage goes up to 80 or 79%.
Yeah, and 73% of every single one of them that live in Judea and Samaria said they would vote for Hamas today.
Exactly. If Hamas had elections, they would be voted in, which means the enemy sees that hurting, killing, mutilating Israelis as a positive aspect.
100%.
But even the whole Arab world, and when I'm calling the whole Muslim world, when I mean the Muslim world, I mean Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, all the Muslims in the world, 83% supported Hamas. That's 83% that support the killing, raping, and mutilating of innocent people.
Elimination of every Jew. Look, we had this talk in private, and I think I have no problem being very public about this, right? We both have talked about this, and we see it. People are getting tired about hearing the same facts over and over and over and over again about what's going on with Israel. But you know what they're not going to be tired of hearing? They're not going to be tired of watching us sit here and exposing the biblical patterns or showing the biblical patterns that expose the lies that continue to get communicated. You want to know why? Because this applies in every area of life. You can take these pictures and you can apply it in every area of life. Look, even if you want to talk about something as simple as the biblical perspective on wealth, do you know how many Christians actually believe that you are ungodly if you are a wealthy person? Or you are actually ungodly if you pursue having a better life for your family? Do you understand? The Bible gives us examples. There are biblical models given to us by the Jews, basically, by the Jews, that show us how to be successful in business, shows us God's blessing, his reward when we seek to be diligent in what we do. The problem isn't being wealthy. The problem is the love of money. That's what the Bible condemns. But look, think about how in society money is projected to people, especially in our culture, right? Think about this. Every single villain that we read about in the comics, they're rich people. You ever notice that? They're all rich. People say, well,
Never thought about that.
People say, well, Batman was rich. Well, Batman didn't have a superpower. You think about it, right? He didn't have a superpower, but every single person that had these superpowers, that were villains were actually rich, right? And the ones that were real heroes, the old school heroes, had no money to their name, came from poor backgrounds. You mean, like, this is how the enemy works. He makes it to where
Interesting.
He makes it to where people have to apologize or explain to themselves or explain to people why they've been blessed with wealth. The reality of it is Satan is good at this. He does this with everything. Money is just a small example. Look, he does this in every single area. It's like all the things that people look at and say are taboo are all because the enemy has attacked it and man has listened to it because they've ran away from the scriptures.
So what should we do now?
Bro, we do exactly what me and you are doing right now. We work our tails off to expose the truth. And one of the ways we do it is what I keep begging everybody here to do. I'm begging everybody in our audience, study the word. Get to know the word of God and use the word of God to be your guide in everything that you do.